Hello, it's me again. Thank you guys for bearing with me while I release non-Animorphs videos. The truth is that these videos just take about 5 times the time and effort to make, and that's in very short supply for me these days. So it takes a while to get through all of the work with the 2 children. Meanwhile, the list recommendations video take like a half hour in total, so I like to just squeeze those in to keep the content output going for all you good people. We also just hit 1,000 subs and monetized, and you Animorphs fans are the foundation of this channel, so I thank you all a million times over. From the bottom of my heart, you make this endeavor extremely rewarding. I'm not doing this for the money, obviously. I just got monetized and I'm making next to nothing, but this has been very rewarding anyway, and I appreciate it. This is actually my second time filming this video. I filmed it a couple days ago, but my lovely neighbor decided to start using her leaf blower like as I started to film, and it really kind of wrecked the audio, so here we are. My name is Marcello. I talk about books for the most part with a heavy focus on the Animorphs series, although as I mentioned, I do have a lot of thriller and mystery recommendations up now, which you should consider. But in this series of videos, I am recapping, reviewing, and analyzing the Animorphs books by K.A. Applegate, and in this video specifically, we're going to focus on the 14th book in the series, The Unknown. I think I've got it back here. I do. I did have this book as a kid. It was never my favorite, but as always, I will approach this reread with fresh eyes. The front cover quote of this book is, "Never underestimate the power of a morph," and the inside cover quote is, "Born to run," and I really think they're just slapping whatever on the covers at this point. Our trivia for this book is that this is the first book in which all 6 of the Animorphs acquire the same new morph, and that is the only piece of trivia that I have for you guys. This one is boring, I guess. Let's recap the plot, and then we'll do what we can to analyze this. No cold open for this one. We jump right into the "My name is Cassie" spiel, our introductory debrief of the Yeerk invasion and the Animorphs' resistance. In the first scene of the book, we see Rachel chastising Cassie for having no clothes that fit and trying to convince her to come to the mall with her. Cassie's dad enters, telling Cassie that she'll actually be coming with him to go check out reports of a sick horse out on the edge of the drylands, a few hours' drive away. Cassie convinces Rachel to come with them, promising a trip to the mall the following day. The drylands is not quite a desert, but is basically an area with sparse flora and a lot of empty space, so a dry land, if you will. Apparently this lady called Crazy Helen called in a report of the horse, who appears to be injured, and the first stop for Cassie, her dad, and Rachel is Crazy Helen's trailer. Crazy Helen directs them towards the horse in question, suggesting that maybe it has eaten some loco weed, which can only be a cannabis joke, right? Crazy Helen also has some crazy ideas about the aliens, which give Cassie and Rachel some pause for a brief second before it becomes clear that these aliens are likely a figment of Helen's imagination and are not Yeerks or Andalites. Anyway, Cassie, Rachel, and Cassie's dad go and find the horse, and they see that it is swaying side to side as it walks. The horse is standing next to a payphone that is by the side of the road and appears to be attempting to use it. I wonder if they're going to change the payphone for future books. Anyway, as Cassie and them approach, the horse runs away, but soon falls to the ground. The group stands over the horse, and Cassie's dad diagnoses a probable snake bite. As they look on, Cassie notices a Yeerk crawling out of the horse's ear. She points this out to Rachel. Cassie's dad, who at this point is busy getting some medical supplies from the truck, does not see the Yeerk. At this point, another horse emerges from the darkness, appears to survey the situation, and then leaves. Cassie is hit with a strong urge to run, and no sooner has she communicated this to Rachel than 2 Dracon beam shots fire out of the sky and everything goes black. Or white. Whichever one. There's a fade out, in any case. Cassie regains consciousness in Crazy Helen's trailer, surrounded by sci-fi memorabilia. Crazy Helen correctly asserts that the aliens were behind the explosion that knocked them all out, but Cassie's dad explains that since they're near the edge of an Air Force facility, near basically the in-universe version of Area 51, which is called Zone 91, that it probably was just a jet that lost a bomb, which is the most absurd, plot-convenient explanation that I think we've heard in this series so far. If that were what happened, you would think that it would be news, right? The United States government accidentally loses live bomb while flying over citizens and almost kills them. If I were Cassie's dad, I would probably be calling up local news networks and looking for someone to sue at this point, but that's not what happens. Anyway, they all have a very ironic conversation about aliens with Crazy Helen before the scene ends. The next day, the gang has convened in the food court of the mall. Marco is talking about how the internet is full of people just like Crazy Helen. A fun fact that is still true, although it is much more full of other things and types of people now. Cassie has just fulfilled her end of the bargain with Rachel and is now the proud owner of a few outfits, and acts as in human morph, making a scene as usual. We get our character intros here with an extra section explaining Tobias's now even more complicated situation. situation. The group talks about what happened the night prior, reasoning that the Yeerks seem to be attempting to infest horses, and they can't agree on a reason for why this would be the case. Ultimately, they decide to investigate further, with Tobias, Rachel, Marco, and Cassie deciding to go visit the desert that weekend in Falconmorph, because if nothing else, it will be an excuse to go flying. By the way, personal update, I am currently in hang gliding training to get my H2 rating, which is the tier before you get to jump off mountains solo. I could jump off of some mountains with an H2 rating. H3 is the good one. Anyway, a few weeks ago, I took a bunch of flights off of a 450-foot hill, and it was amazing. This has been my dream for my whole life, purely because of the descriptions of flight in this book, and it has been phenomenal to finally see it come to fruition. I will be posting more hang gliding stuff on my second channel once I get a little bit better and can make actually entertaining content for you guys, since a jump off of a 450-foot cliff only really equates to about a minute of flight. But yeah, I just wanted to share, if any of you dream of flight, I think that hang gliding is about as close to being an actual bird as you can get. Highly recommend, and feel free to comment about it, and I will chat with you guys. Anyway, the following day, Cassie and Rachel are at school, with Cassie in one of her new outfits. They pass a few boys who all say hi to Rachel and who all manage to get Cassie's name wrong until Jake swoops in to tell Cassie that she always looks great regardless of what she's wearing. Later in class, Marco showers Cassie with praise, ultimately revealing that Rachel paid him to do so. It's pretty and like clockwork, more power tools working outside. I don't know if there's anything to be done about this. Well, you guys are gonna have to endure some gas engines. I'm really sorry. I can't film this again. I have no free time these days. They say that the sound of the suburbs is birds chirping, but it is the sound of a leaf blower. Oh, goodness. Where were we? Yeah, so Rachel pays Marco to give Cassie compliments, and it's kind of inconsequential to the plot of the book, but the small scenes like this always serve to kind of remind us that the Animorphs are teenagers, and even though they murder aliens and have the weight of the world on their shoulders, they are not immune to teenager things. Later, Cassie, Rachel, Tobias, and Marco meet at Cassie's barn. The three humans morph birds of prey, and they take off for the drylands, sorry. We get a whole page about how great flying is, and after a while, the group arrives at Zone 91. There is a sign warning trespassers to keep out, which the group ignores, swooping down to demorph inside the restricted zone, where they are promptly captured by military men with guns. Presumably human men, although we don't know for a fact that they're not controllers. The men are confused as to why the group has no shoes and is 2 miles away from the nearest road, and they decide to take them into custody for further questioning. When they're inside the military base, Cassie sees a flyer for the gardens on the wall. It appears to be a sign-up sheet for some kind of military field trip. Marco antagonizes the captain in charge of interrogating them, whose name is Torelli, by demanding to know where they're keeping the aliens. Torelli commands them to write down their names and their parents' phone numbers, and the trio do so, giving fake names and phone numbers. Cassie writes down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for some reason. The humor here is appreciated, but this isn't really in character for Cassie. I get that she's supposed to be like a good girl who's bad at lying, but come on now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Torelli leaves them alone, and they all morph roaches to make their escape. They manage to find their way outside. Tobias swoops down to pick them up. As they're flying away, Cassie manages to fall through Tobias's talons and get run over by a tank. Tobias is able to pick her up again, and they get out of there and demorph. A lot of gratuitous action in this one. Marco, of course, finds the whole thing very funny, though he reveals that the reason that he was provoking Captain Torelli with all of his commands to show them the aliens was because Marco would rather that they all get written off as nutjob conspiracy theorists than have the military actually wondering why these humans were found without shoes miles away from the nearest road inside of their secret area. This is sound reasoning, and I love when Marco's rational side is showcased in books that he does not narrate. Good character work. So the group is about to morph back into birds and leave when they encounter some more horses. As they watch, one of the horses poops, which for some reason seems to provoke a reaction from the others. The pooping horse then moves behind some bushes to finish the job, proving beyond a doubt that these are not, in fact, normal horses, and there is some type of mischief afoot. The next day, a Saturday, the group is once again in Cassie's barn. With Cassie's suspicion of the Yeerk horses confirmed, the Animorphs are strategizing about how to further investigate. The logical move would be for they themselves to morph horses, but acquiring 6 different horse morphs is a bigger challenge. They don't want to all show up as the same horse. That would be a little bit too sus. Rachel mentions the local racetrack, and the group concurs that this is probably their best bet, so to speak. Before they disembark, Tobias wonders aloud why the Yeerks might want to invest horses, with Cassie reasoning that they are likely also curious as to what is going on in the mysterious Zone 91. With that, the group is off to the literal races as seagulls. Upon arrival, they all fly into an empty stall in a stable where the horses are kept, and they demorph. Of course, as soon as they finish demorphing, two old men walk in on them, immediately noticing Andalite Axe. The Animorphs tell Axe to put his head down, and they try to convince the two men that they are all in there together, grooming their weirdly shaped blue horse, but it obviously doesn't work, and Axe winds up knocking the two men out with the flat of his tail blade. The Animorphs all split up in their escape attempt, assaulting a few more stable workers in the process, and Cassie finally winds up in a stall with a stallion, who naturally she acquires and morphs. She then immediately leaves the stall lest someone see the two identical horses together, and she winds up being saddled up for the next race. Cassie is at the starting gate trying to control her horse panic at being in such an enclosed space when the jockey tells her to calm down, and naturally her response is to use thought speak on him. And here is our needless security breach for this book. Cassie winds up chatting with the jockey throughout the race and also winds up winning the race, and then the scene at the racetrack ends. I remember having this feeling when I first read this book as a child, and I'm having it again now. That felt like a very schlocky action sequence with basically no consequence at all. It's fine if you found it fun. I'm just bothered by the needless security breaches, the assault of the stable staff, and for what? Surely Cassie did not need to run that race as a horse, and also, how could she realistically have won? And what about the poor jockey, who's going to spend the rest of his life trying to get the real horse to talk to him again? Anyway, none of this is that big of a deal, but given where this book is all going, it seems a little gratuitous. So the Animorphs at this point have all acquired individual horses, and they make their way to the drylands. While on their way, Marco attempts to convince the group to use their horse morphs to somehow rig races and make a bunch of money, but no one seems to think that's a good idea. Upon arrival in the drylands, they see the same group of horses that they saw earlier, including the modest horse who went to poop behind the bush. There appear to be a few normal horses with the group, and so the Animorphs decide to simply join them in their horse morphs. The group of horses, Yeerk horses, and Animorphs amble into Zone 91, and as they walk, some of the horses start speaking in Gallard, the universal galactic tongue, to each other. Axe can understand Gallard, and he translates. The horse says, "If we do this right, we will be off this idiotic assignment, out of these stupid bodies, and back on board the ship where we belong." The horses then split up, and the Animorphs follow suit, with Cassie, Jake, and Tobias in one group, and Axe, Marco, and Rachel in the other. As Cassie's group approaches a large hangar, the hangar door starts to open, and as it opens, the Yeerk horses suddenly just bolt for the entrance, and Cassie, Jake, and Tobias follow them. They basically brute force their way into the hangar, which presumably is hiding whatever grand secret the government is keeping from us. There's some light and consequential action, and then the group happens upon a glass room housing a pedestal of shining steel surrounded by cameras, lights, and massive computers. And atop the pedestal is something clearly alien in construction, but the Yeerks do not seem to know what it is. At this point, the horses all leave. I'd like to take a second to note that there is a lot of humor in this book that I am just glossing over. Like in the previous scene, the horses leave only after Torelli comes in and tells them all, "Horses, about face," and they listen to him for some reason. Some of these things make me chuckle, but I largely leave them out because I feel like they're more of a part of the actual experience of reading the book, and I am not trying to replace that experience with these videos. I also bring this up because I think that the so-called filler books, and we'll talk later about whether or not this is one, I think in the filler books that there's a lot more humor, at least there was in this one, and I think that this might be possibly to compensate for the lack of consequential plot points that happen. It is certainly true that this book has a lot of silly humor, and we haven't even gotten to the best bits yet. Anyway, as the group walks away discussing what they have seen, Axe indicates that he knows what the alien structure was, but before he's able to tell them, a bug fighter soars down, landing on a nearby pile of rocks. A bunch of Hork-Bajir step out, followed by Visser 3. Visser 3 interrogates the controller horses, cutting the apparent leader's head off when he tells the Visser that they were unable to determine what the alien structure was. Visser 3 laments the amount of loss that this mission has caused them so far. The horse controller that died from the snake bite, and ironically, the poor controller horse whose head he just chopped off in front of everyone. The Visser then divulges his backup plan: infest a few of the military members stationed at Zone 91 and use them to find out what's going on in there. At this point, he notices the Animorphs in horse morph, and he commands the Hork-Bajir to kill them. There's a little kerfuffle, and the Animorphs run away. As they're running away, Cassie asks Rachel how fast Hork-Bajir are, and Rachel says that they are very fast. And I need to break the immersion for 1 second here. In my analysis of the last book, I pointed out that while the group is making their way to the Hork-Bajir Garden of Eden, running from Yeerks the whole time, that it would have been advantageous for all of them to morph wolves and just run with the Hork-Bajir. And there were a few comments that said that the wolves would probably have been too fast, and that the Hork-Bajir are like big lumbering creatures, and that they were probably the limiting factor as far as their speed, but given what we just found out, I rest my case. They should have morphed wolves in the last book and run with the Hork-Bajir through the woods. Anyway, the horse Animorphs escape, and as they wind down from all of the excitement, Axe finally lets them know what the piece of equipment housed in Zone 91 actually is. It's an Andalite toilet. A primitive one, too. So the group calls it a night, and when Cassie arrives home, her parents are not very pleased with her. She lets them know that she was with Rachel and Jake, and they dismiss her to her room after threatening to talk to her about the birds and the bees some more. Cassie then overhears them talking about what a good kid they have, a heartwarming moment that now, as a parent, I appreciate quite a bit. As it transpires, Cassie's parents, like everyone else in the book, are well aware of her feelings for Jake. So then this trope happens that I kind of hate, where a character says something and it reminds another character of something else that a third character has said, and that leads to a subsequent revelation. In this case, Cassie's dad uses the phrase backup plan, which reminds Cassie of how Visser 3 mentioned a backup plan. She doesn't understand what this backup plan might be, since it's only an Andalite toilet in Zone 91 and thus poses no obvious threat to the Yeerk invasion, so she just tries to put it out of her mind and go to sleep. But she wakes up at 4 in the morning realizing that any discovery of alien tech will put the humans on high alert and make them primed to be more receptive to the idea that there is an alien invasion actually happening. Obviously, this would not be good for the Yeerks, so this is why Visser 3 has a backup plan, and as she thinks about it, Cassie develops a theory of what this plan may be. She remembers the Gardens field trip sign-up sheet at the Army base, and somehow remembers like the dates and times on the sheet, and realizes that the trip is the next day. What if the Yeerks decided to strike during the field trip? The following night, the group assumes owl morphs and flies over to the Gardens, but it transpires that Cassie read the sign-up sheet wrong since it was in military time, so they show up an hour late to the party. Frantically, they try to think of where the Yeerks might strike, fearing that they're already too late, and Cassie names 2 possible infestation sites: the Log Ride, which is dark inside, or the House of Horrors Ride, which obviously is also dark. The group splits up, and Cassie and Marco and Jake wind up on the Log Ride with Rachel, Tobias, and Axe in the House of Horrors. Cassie is beating herself up for getting the military time wrong. She should just be impressed with herself for remembering the time and the date at all. And Jake comforts her. Nice. They demorph and sneak onto the log ride as humans, with Marco quipping the whole time, but his big mouth winds up getting them in trouble because the captain who interrogated them in Zone 91, Torelli, recognizes Marco's voice. He attempts to arrest the trio as the ride goes on, but he has some trouble getting a hold of them over all the twists and turns. The log ride progresses, and it's about to go into a dark tunnel, which the Animorphs know will be their best opportunity to escape, but which also will be the best chance for the Yeerks to strike. Marco baits Torelli into calling security for some reason, and then the logs enter the tunnel, and they are thrown into darkness. The Animorphs jump off the log, the captain jumps after them, and all of the humans get knocked around a bit before they are forced out of the tunnel and down a giant waterfall drop that marks the end of the log ride. No Yeerks. Ultimately, the 3 Animorphs are able to escape Torelli's clutches, and they make their way back to the House of Horrors, where they assume the Yeerks must be planning their attack. As they enter the house, Marco continues to be quippy, and one of the people on the ride asks him why he's so cynical. Torelli shows up, demanding that the Animorphs be placed under arrest, and then the Marines on the ride with the Animorphs tell them that they're not going anywhere. They're going to arrest them as soon as the ride's over. The ride then enters a dark room with 6 Hork-Bajir warriors and Visser 3, all hiding in plain sight as a part of the haunted house. Also present in the room are Rachel in Grizzly Bear morph, with Tobias perched on her shoulder as a hawk and Axe as a rattlesnake wrapped around her paw. Cassie then hears a scream from behind them on the ride, even as she realizes that it is extremely likely that the Visser is going to go after Torelli specifically due to his high rank as a captain in the military. A battle ensues, and Cassie and Jake and Marco step into the shadows to quickly assume battle morphs. As the fight turns in favor of the Animorphs, the Visser and the Hork-Bajir grab Torelli and basically just cut their way out of the haunted house, escaping into the gardens at large. So this caravan of fleeing Andalites and Hork-Bajir, followed by Animorphs in various battle morphs, runs into the nightly gardens parade, and a bunch of Looney Tunes characters surround them as the Animorphs re-engage with the Yeerks in battle, killing a few innocent Hork-Bajir hosts in the process. Ultimately, the Animorphs win, Visser 3 retreats, and Torelli manages to avoid getting kidnapped and infested. The official story in the newspaper the next day is that a group of pranksters dressed up like animals and aliens vandalized the House of Horrors. It's very good that smartphones weren't a thing, and that cameras weren't as ubiquitous as they are when this was created, because anyone who was there would know that these were not costumes, but I digress. The next day, the gang meets in Cassie's barn to debrief. Tobias worries that the Yeerks will continue to try to infiltrate Zone 91, but Jake says that since Torelli will be extra on guard now, it will be fine and the Yeerks don't stand a chance. Rachel adds that it'll actually be good for the Yeerks to keep trying to infiltrate Zone 91, because they know that there's only a Andalite toilet there, so the Yeerks will be spending all of these resources on something pretty inconsequential, which will detract resources from the invasion effort. But if this is the case, then why did the Animorphs even try to protect these people in the first place? Shouldn't they expect that Visser 3 might try something else, like kidnapping Torelli while he's on his way home from work or something? This is just another one of those instances where the Animorphs thwart a Yeerk plan, and then it's kind of just like, well, we beat that threat, on to the next thing, and we're never supposed to think about it again. Anyway, there's some more banter about Cassie's fashion choices, and the book ends. Anticlimactic, I know, so let's talk about it. Okay, so is this a filler book? I would argue yes, and not just because the big reveal is literally a toilet joke. While I understand that the Animorphs are still preventing the Yeerks from furthering their invasion efforts, much like in Book 12, where they're preventing the Yeerks from infesting Jonathan Taylor Thomas, it all feels very low stakes, arguably even lower stakes than Book 12, and the reason for that is the tone of this entire book. It is a goofy book. Crazy Helen and the alleged aliens, Zone 91, the pooping horse Yeerk who gets embarrassed, the entire ridiculous racetrack shenanigans scene. It's all very over the top. It's all very silly. There are very few solid character moments to anchor this book to the rest of the series also, at least in a substantial way. We learn that Cassie's parents know that she likes Jake, and we have the Rachel dressing Cassie bit, but both of those things aren't super consequential. Rachel is ragging Cassie for her fashion choices throughout the series. When the book ends, we're kind of left with this question of why the Yeerks don't continue to attempt to infiltrate our military to gain access to, you know, whatever secrets, and the answer is somehow the Zone 91 management will be on high alert, so the Yeerks won't be able to do it, even though I could think of 30 ways right now that they definitely could that don't involve infesting horses or going to the gardens to snatch employees off the haunted house rides. And then the group also decides that if the Yeerks do continue to infiltrate the military, it'll be good because they're wasting their resources and it's a waste of time. I don't think that Yeerks making slaves of high-ranking military officers in any capacity would be a good thing for the resistance effort. But ultimately, the book just doesn't seem to take itself very seriously, and so we are not expected to take it very seriously either, and thus, I will not. But I'm still going to rate it. For plot, I'm giving this book a 5. It has moments where it seems like it may go somewhere, but it doesn't. For reference, I gave book 12 a 6, so that's kind of where we stand. For significance, I'm also giving this book a 5, and the only reason it's not lower is because my personal view is that it's significant to keep the Yeerks out of the military, even if the book seems to disagree. For character, another 5. The characters are themselves, their actions fit within what we know of their characters, but we learn nothing new, and like I said earlier, we get very few nice character moments for Cassie. For writing, I'm gonna break my own rule. I'm giving this book a 7. Even though K.A. wrote it, I just don't like the silly tone of this book. It almost feels like K.A. knows it's a filler and is kind of winking at us, which isn't my favorite thing. Maybe you like it, and that's totally fine. Everyone's allowed to like different stuff. A lot of people don't seem to understand that based on the comment section of one of my mystery videos, but it's fine if you liked it. Wasn't super for me. Anyway, this leaves us with a final score of 5.4, putting this book in 14th place of the 14 books that we have read so far. Am I surprised? Not really. You shouldn't be either. I think we all saw this one coming. This book is notoriously a bit of a lapse in quality. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Maybe my output will increase soon, maybe it won't. You're gonna have to ask the 2 young overlords who govern every aspect of my life right now. Thank you very much. See you soon.